So while Trump was turning another Middle East ceasefire into a headline disaster, Prime Minister Mark Carney was in Jeddah doing something no Canadian Prime Minister had done in 26 years. He sat down with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, signed 13 commercial deals, and walked out with a direct pipeline to one of the largest pools of investment capital on the planet.
And here's what makes this trip different from any photo op you've seen before. Canada didn't show up to shake hands, not at all. Prime Minister Carney arrived with a $1 trillion investment pitch, a formal coordination council, and the groundwork for binding legal agreements that will outlast any single government.
Yeah, the United States is still trying to run the world through threats and ultimatums, but Canada just ran a two-country diplomatic sprint. Turkey, then Saudi Arabia, and it came home with more economic leverage than it had a week ago.
Canada isn't reacting to America anymore. Canada is building its own future.
Now, we have to be honest right from the start here because this is Saudi Arabia. What they did to journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the treatment of dissidents, the long record of human rights concerns that critics are absolutely right to raise, we're not glossing over any of that.
And Prime Minister Carney did not pretend that those concerns vanish because there's money on the table. His line was, "Engagement is not endorsement." And then he said something even more pointed. Lecturing countries from afar is an ineffective strategy. It's satisfying, but it's ineffective.
And that one sentence tells you exactly where Canadian foreign policy is going under Mark Carney. Less performance, more leverage. Less moral theater from a safe distance, and more face-to-face diplomacy where Canada can actually move the needle.
Former Liberal Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy has already pushed back on this. He warned that Prime Minister Carney is moving away from a long Canadian tradition of putting human rights at the center of foreign policy. And that criticism, it has weight. But Prime Minister Carney's counter-argument is that if you are in the room, you can raise things directly. And if you're not in the room, well, you simply can't.
And that gap between performing principle from Ottawa versus actually moving the needle in person, well, that's the tension that's running through this entire trip right now.
So let's walk through what Prime Minister Carney actually secured in Saudi Arabia, because the headlines gave you a broad stroke and missed some of the bigger numbers underneath.
First, the Coordination Council. Canada and Saudi Arabia launched a new Canada-Saudi Arabia Coordination Council led by foreign ministers to deepen cooperation across trade, investment, defense, education, culture, and consular issues. It sounds a lot like government jargon, because it kind of is, but what it actually means is a standing table. Both sides keep meeting, ministers keep solving problems, and projects keep moving.
So this translates into faster pathways for Canadian companies trying to work in the Gulf. You'll get more reliable contracts when consular cases come up, and real opportunities for Canadian firms in mining, engineering, technology, education, energy, and AI.
Then there are the 13 commercial agreements and MOUs worth over $1 billion directly. Health technology, defense, advanced technology, and a whole bunch of other things. But the $1 billion number is honestly just a down payment on what Prime Minister Carney is really after.
Right. The bigger pitch is the $1 trillion National Investment Plan, a 5-year program built around Canadian public money, private capital, and institutional investors. Mark Carney wants Saudi Arabia's public investment fund in that mix. The Saudi PIF is one of the largest pools of capital on the planet, and Saudi officials are already confirmed for Carney's Canada Investment Summit in Toronto this September.
And Canadian pension funds are expected to travel to Saudi Arabia in the coming months to identify specific opportunities. We're talking about patient, long-term capital here, the kind that finances mines, ports, LNG projects, clean energy, and AI infrastructure. Projects that take years to build and need committed money behind them.
And here's where the story gets even bigger. Canada is sitting on roughly $2 trillion in undeveloped critical mineral wealth. Lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, the exact minerals the entire world is racing to secure right now. Saudi Arabia wants in on that, and the agreements signed with Jeddah include direct pathways for Saudi capital into Canadian mineral extraction and development.
And the flow goes both ways here. Canadian pension capital, also in the trillions, is being directed towards Saudi Arabia's infrastructure build-out. Both sides are investing in each other.
The binding piece is the FIPA, the Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement. Canada and Saudi Arabia have targeted a deal by early 2027. And FIPA is essentially a legal rulebook for investors. Here's how each country treats the other country's investors. Here's what protections exist. Here's what happens if there is a dispute. Rulebook.
An FIPA does not make Saudi Arabia Canada's best friend here. It does not erase the human rights record. What it does is it creates a legal certainty that makes sure projects actually move. A mine can have the minerals, a port can have the location, an energy project can have the buyers. But if the legal foundation is shaky, the financing, it just doesn't come and nothing gets built.
Canada and Saudi Arabia are launching a double taxation agreement, which sounds like the most tedious document ever written, Dave. But it is the kind of friction-moving deal that quietly decides whether projects get financed or sit on a shelf for a decade. Friction is what kills deals without anyone ever talking about it.
And there was one moment in Carney's speech that most people didn't even catch. He told the Saudis that Canada is drawing direct inspiration from Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia's own national transformation plan. He was telling the Crown Prince, we're doing what you did. We're diversifying away from a single dominant dependency. And in our case, that dependency is the U.S.
That is a very deliberate diplomatic signal. Carney walked into Jeddah and told Saudi leadership, we are thinking like you. We're running a national transformation and we want to build this together.
And the numbers on Canada's broader trade shift, they back that up completely. Carney has announced that Canada currently has free trade agreements covering 1.5 billion consumers worldwide. The target is to double that to 3 billion this year. Going from 1.5 billion to 3 billion free trade consumers in 12 months isn't just an incremental adjustment. He's sprinting here.
And here's the line that should have been the headline everywhere, but it wasn't. Carney said Canada is growing jobs at twice the rate of the United States right now, not despite the trade war, but during it. He made that point in the same breath as the Saudi announcement, and the reason is obvious. Canada is not waiting for Washington's permission to succeed anymore.
And that is the contrast running through this entire trip. Trump keeps treating allies and trading partners like tenants who are behind on rent. Carney is treating countries like potential investors, customers, and long-term strategic partners.
One approach says, do what I want or I will punish you. The other says, okay, here's what Canada can build and here's what Canada can supply. Here is why our institutions are stable and here's why your capital will be taken seriously.
And investors, they can live with disagreement, but they cannot live with unpredictability. They want functioning institutions, clear rules, and leadership that does not rewrite trade policy based on whatever Trump is feeling at the moment.
Now listen, Canada just recorded its highest level of foreign direct investment in 20 years. Prime Minister Carney announced that on the same trip. Man, he's busy. When the United States becomes the unstable option, capital starts moving toward the stable alternative. And right now, Canada is making a very good pitch to be that alternative.
Now, is this strategy without risk? Absolutely not. Saudi Arabia is not what I would call a straightforward partner. The human rights record is real, the leverage Saudi Arabia can exert over global oil prices is real, and any deepening relationship, it brings exposure alongside opportunity.
And our Prime Minister is going to have to keep answering axe-worthy questions. How do you hold a serious human rights opposition while signing binding economic agreements with governments that have that terrible record? Well, there's no clean answer at all, and every government that has tried to thread that needle has found it very uncomfortable, to say the least.
But the alternative, staying home, writing strongly worded statements, and watching the rest of the world sign deals that Canada decided it was too principled to pursue, that has costs too. Real costs for workers, for industries, for Canada's ability to influence anything beyond its own borders.
Listen, We traveled because we said travel opens people's hearts and minds to the world. Until you have been there, you really don't know. So I think that is important in this case as well. Mark Carney is saying we need to be in the room to have influence, and he has a point. Do we agree with it? I don't know yet. Dave and I were invited to Saudi Arabia, and we declined. We did not want to go there and support that regime. Were we right or wrong? I don't know.
So here's where we land on this. Carney is betting that a Canada with more partners, more options, and more economic leverage is harder to bully, harder to isolate, and better positioned to protect its own people. The Saudi trip, the Turkey trip, the European partnerships, they're all pieces of that same move.
And whether or not you agree with every decision along the way, the direction is clear. Canada is building its own table instead of waiting for a seat at someone else's. And that's what democracy is. Disagreements can happen, but we can stay united and move forward.
So here's the question we're posing to you today. Saudi Arabia just moved into Canada's economic orbit, and Canada moved into theirs. Do you think that this relationship survives the next American president, who will almost certainly pressure both sides to choose?
And do you think that Carney made the right decision reaching out to Saudi Arabia and starting to have diplomatic relations?
Let us know in the comments, because we read them all, and this is an important thing that we want you to weigh in on.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and make sure to check out the pinned comment for all the fun stuff. Dave's Spicy Substack is on the books, man.
And don't forget, give this a like, a hype, and a share so other people can weigh in as well.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you right here tomorrow.
Ciao for now.